Grandma Sarah came from Russia. Her husband, who would be my mother's real, Grandma Matilda's real father, died while Grandma Sarah was pregnant. And she came to the United States with Grandma Sarah, who was a year old. And I will tell you, nobody in the world was nicer or better than Grandma Sarah in my life.
Oh, really?
My husband and my mother, yes, and Ivy. But Grandma Sarah was, my sister Ellie used to say all the time, nobody was like her. That's all I could say. She was just an angel, and I'm sorry that, anyway. My father-in-law, he came from Poland years later, and he escaped. Then it wasn't Hitler, it was a Tsar. And my father-in-law came in, believe this or not, under a truck that had it must have been a wagon that had chickens, and he was underneath the chickens. That's the story. And somehow he paid somebody off, and he got on a boat and came to America. My mother would go to the theater and come home and play the song. She heard to a musical where they took us to the theater a lot. That's one thing. One Friday night a month, my parents would take us on the subway to New York to see a show. My mother would come home and play the entire the music that's how musical she was. I was a flop, and Ellie was a little bit better, but neither one of us liked the piano. My mother had all the music, and my mother had a much harder life because Grandpa Jake wasn't nice to her. And if anything happened if Grandma Sarah didn't do what he wanted, this side of him we never saw, never. Unfortunately, my mother, when we were older, my mother told us these stories because Ellie and I adored him, and he was wonderful. He was wonderful to us.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, but he wasn't. Whenever if he was angry at my grandma, he was threatened to throw my mother out of the house. That's which is I'm saying it to you, but it's still hard for me to believe him. I can't believe my mother would make up such a story. I was very, very lucky because growing up, Ellie and I had more love than any children could get because we not only got it from our parents, we got it from my Uncle Georgie, and even my two aunts were absolutely wonderful. My father's business was you've never heard of this word, I'm sure, a taxpayer. A taxpayer, at least in Brooklyn, maybe it was all over, I don't know, was where we lived. It's a street with the houses are stuck together, and the business is on the bottom, and you go inside and walk up. There are 2 flights of steps, and there's an apartment on each floor. Can you visualize what I said?
Yeah, totally.
And my father's, quote, store was not a retail store. That's where his business was because he was in the gift business. And, that's what was very hard for my mother. I left that out. My father was a traveling salesman. And I always said to myself when I got married, I would never marry a man that wasn't home every night, and that's what I did because it was very sad. He was gone. Maybe he was gone 2 weeks at a time, come home for a few weeks because he would go to sell his. Do you know the word tchotchkes? You know what that means? Like little gifts and children's toys and little small things. And he would sell it to toy stores and gift shops all over. He would go to Chicago. He'd go to Detroit. He worked very hard. He never became a rich man, but Ellie and I had everything. Except I hated living over a store.
Yeah, I bet it was.
And when I once told a therapist what I've just told you, he told me, you were really an abused child, Marian. I said, abused? They never hit us. We had camp. We had this. We had that. Because we knew too much. The two of us knew everything about the relationship. And
that's really interesting though. But I also just wanted to ask you how you're doing.
How am I doing? I'm getting old and crotchety, but I'm okay. Considering my age, I'm doing okay, but getting older is difficult because I used to have friends coming out of the woodwork. If you know I was busy all the time with whatever I wanted to do. I would say maybe I have 2 friends left who they live in Florida. Everybody, all my wonderful friends, my neighbors, they're all dead because I'm going to be 93, and everybody died before me. And my sister died so young, and I still can't get over that. So you want to know about me, that's between her and Seymour, I can't get over those 2 deaths. So everybody's got their package.
Yeah.
Ivy was probably, then I think now I could cry. No, the way I talk about Grandma Sarah, Ivy is in that same category in my life, in my heart.
Yeah, me too.
Nobody like her. She could have been a psychiatrist when she was 8 years old.
Oh, you think so?
Yes, I do. I really, you know what I mean. She just understood, and she remembers this. I would sit with her in the den in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn house, which was like a mansion. What a house. And I would read books to her, and I would hold her, and I'd squeeze her thighs because I wanted to touch her. And, I got so upset when she learned how to read, I couldn't do that anymore. So my memories of her are just, I just have only, I can't put into words. I can't. And I'm lucky.
Yeah, I love her so much.
And I know that she loves me too. And it's very nice to know that somebody loves you. You know how many? Very often, it's very interesting that you ask me these questions, because the only other person that I would have discussed what you're asking me is your mother. Sometimes we start to talk, and I will say something. She'll say, "Tell me more," because she wants to know more about Ellie's life. So it's most people are not that interested. You've got her genes in you, and of course, I love your father. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm named after her, I guess. But
of course you are. Of course, you're named after her. Yes, yes. And you.
I'd love to talk about her sometime too.
Oh, I could ever. All right. You know what? When you want to again, call me, and but if I talked about her, I'll need a box of Kleenex because I cry for her all the time. I cannot tell you what it was like. Oh, you know what? I don't want to. I'm afraid I don't want to cry now. I will tell you anything you want to know. I could just tell you your grandmother was. Nobody was smarter. Nobody was funnier. Nobody had the biggest mouth. It was a good one. She had the mouthpiece. That's the truth. And I haven't gotten over her dying. So what can I tell you? And look how many years ago? 40 years ago?
That's really beautiful. It's like honestly making me cry a little bit too. I
was so lucky that I had that in my life, and that will be another phone call because I could go on and on about her. All right, honey pie. I'm so glad you called me. I'm so glad.
Yeah, of course.
And isn't it interesting that I can hear you clear as a bell now?
I know. I just put my phone off of speakerphone so you can hear me better.
Oh. Good. Well, now I hear you perfectly. And now I'm going to put your phone number in my book. I wrote it on a pad. I was dialing. Thank God you called me back. I was dialing 743, and they kept telling me that phone. They kept saying that phone is broken. And now I look, it's 79. Oh, see how you can make a mistake? I guess I was excited hearing your voice. No excuse, Marian, but I would. All right, I can only say I'm lucky that I have relatives like a relative like you, and call me anytime you want about anything, okay?